Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you my August wrap up. I'm very excited because August, I pulled through in August. This was my most successful reading month of the year so far. Very proud of myself. And before we talk about the individual books and I give you reviews, I want to go into a couple of stats as I always do with my wrap-ups. So these stats are about my TBR reduction. As a little reminder, I started out the year with 37 books on my physical TBR and I wanted to reduce that to 0 by the end of the year. Then we started out August with 52 books on the TBR, which is the highest that we have reached so far this year, which is very sad. It's not going so super well with the TBR reduction, as you can see, but as I said, in August we turned things around. So the three most important numbers for the TBR reduction, now I have some fly here, the animals, the animals and the sabotage. Three most important numbers. The first number is the number of books that I have read in August, and that was 13 books, which is really great. That is the highest number I had so far this year, so well done me. Then we have the number of books that I have bought, and in August I bought 3 books, and 2 of those were like books I bought during my travels. One was an audiobook, so I feel very good about that as well. And then we have the number of books that I have borrowed, and I have counted 4 books for that. You may have seen my vlog where I borrowed quite a few ebooks from my library just in case, so I would have enough books with me during my trip. I don't count all of these because that was I returned them after I came back home and I didn't read them, so they don't add up on the TBR. So if we take this together, we do have to consider one more thing. In August, I returned 2 books I had previously borrowed unread to the library, so those are off the TBR for now until I get them back to actually read them. And then I also had 1 reread. So now we take this all together. We have 13 books read, 3 books bought, 4 books borrowed, 1 reread, and 2 books returned unread. Believe me, I have done the math and we have reduced the TBR by 7 books. 7 books in August. And I'm very proud of myself. I'm very, very proud. So at the end of August, we have gotten the TBR down again to 45. And if I do exceptionally well in September, we might reach the number of the start of the year again. We could do it, guys. We could do it. So that is very exciting to me. This year really has not been the success that I thought it would be with the TBR reduction, but August was great and we're going to carry that energy into September. Okay, so after these stats that for once did not put any shame into my face, now we go into the individual book reviews and I will tell you all about those 13 books that I finished in August. So the first book I finished in August was a library book, and that was Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is a literary fiction, historical fiction novella that has a story that is set in Ireland, I think in the 80s, and we are following a man who delivers coals for heating in the winter, and when he delivers that to the convent that is at the edge of town, he has a weird encounter with a girl there, which leads him to explore a little bit more what's going on at that convent. This is a very important story, but also a story that I think is super well rounded in the short amount of pages you have. You really get a good look at society at the time, and while these terrible things that happened at these convents could go on for so long because people were just afraid to endanger their own families if they went against these institutions. I really love this one. This one is set during Christmas, so might be a good read to pick up in the next couple of months if you haven't already. I gave this one 5 stars. Next up, I finished off a book I had kind of left over from July, which was like my Paris read, The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. This, I do have this German copy that is a abridged version of the tale. So I ended up reading a ebook for that. I got it from the Gutenberg Project, which I will link down below. If you don't know the Gutenberg Project, it is basically a website where you can download classics, like ebooks for classics, and I think they even have done some audiobooks, and it's completely free, so I would highly recommend, if you like reading classics, to check out the Gutenberg Project. For The Hunchback of Notre Dame, this is the second Victor Hugo that I have read. I've already read Les Mis a couple of years ago. I really like his writing style. I think that he's much more entertaining and he loves some drama. So you can definitely tell that in this book as well. Like, if you take the actual plot of this book, it is so dramatic. However, he does also have these bits where he over describes Paris for you. So in this regard, I thought reading this while I was actually in Paris and shortly after was a very good choice, because it just made it easier for me to understand what he was going on and on and on about, and to picture some of these places, to understand the distances between different things and all of that. And then also some of the stuff was helpful to just like Google and look up, because some of these things that he writes about don't actually exist anymore. They were destroyed during the French Revolution. So overall, I had a really good time with this book, which is a weird thing to say, because like the view on disability and also on Romani people that we have in this book isn't like the very modern view. However, I think that Victor Hugo is trying to tell us that a lot of the prejudices that we have and how we exclude certain people from society is very dumb. I think that is kind of what he's trying to say with this book, and it has like terrible consequences for some of these characters that absolutely do not deserve it. So in the end, I gave this one 4 stars. If you do want to try reading Victor Hugo, I would still recommend starting with Les Mis. I think that one has more characters that are like easy to love, while this one is higher on the like drama scale, but the characters are also a little bit harder to love. So after that, I started my little wheel spin challenge. If you haven't seen that yet, you can check out my reading vlogs for August, where the wheel chose what I would read from my like pre-2025 physical TBR, because that is what I want to get rid of. And at the beginning of the month, this reel was like ruthless. It really gave me some difficult reads, and the first one of those is a biography of a woman called Andreas-Salomé, written by Kerstin Decker. So this is a German book. Andreas-Salomé was a woman who was born in Russia and then lived in different European countries, mainly in Germany as well, and she was quite the interesting lady, and she had a lot of like very interesting friends, people like Nietzsche, and then later on also Rilke, as well as Freud. And she wasn't necessarily a feminist. She definitely thought that she was like the exceptional woman, and in that regard I don't think I would have gotten along with her like super well, but it was interesting to read about her, and in the end I gave this one 3.5 stars. What surprised me a little bit about this book is just the number of like original quotes from like letters and all of that stuff. So you're really reading a lot of like classic texts that is not like very easy to get through. Talking about classic text, the next book the wheel gave me was Links wo das Herz ist by Leonhard. This is a German author who lived between the late 1800s and I think like the 1960s maybe. This book was published quite late on in his life. Now the cat did actually turn off my mic. Wonderful. This is very autobiographical for the life of the author, which I very much enjoyed. He did have quite an interesting life. He was a pacifist, so he was very much exiled during the First World War and the Second World War. During the First World War, he stayed in Switzerland, and in the Second World War, he went from Switzerland to France and then had to escape France as well. Ended up in the US for a while, and then after the war, returned to Germany again. And we read about those different stages. This is kind of like a fictionalized version, so it is not autobiographical as a like actual autobiography. However, it is very, very close to his life, and I really enjoyed reading about this. I gave this one 4 stars. And then the wheel was like, hey, how about I give you the longest book on your physical TBR to read? This is Ein weites Feld by Günter Grass. This is just under 800 pages. This is also a very famous kind of like classic, modern classic German author. I have read one of his books before, however, this one is a very late work. In this one, we're looking at the German reunion in the 1990s, but we're following a character who thinks that he is the reincarnation of Theodor Fontane, and through that, the author is kind of trying to show parallels in the history of Germany, which was interesting. If this book would have been 200 pages, I would have given it like a very high rating. However, it just dragged on and on and on, and 780 pages of that was just a lot. So in the end, I gave this one 3 stars, and I do not recommend you read this if you're not like super well versed in German history, because it will make no sense at all. Then I gave myself a little bit of a break from the wheel to finish off a reading vlog, and for that I finished Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett. Now this one is the 3rd book in the Emily Wilde series, and with that I closed off that vlog. The vlog is uploaded, you can see it, you can watch it, you can hear all of my thoughts on the whole series. Personally, I really enjoyed this finale. I think it was my favorite book of the 3. I think that the plot had very high stakes, and we kind of explored like things that I didn't really think we would do. I think in general this series just really surprised me in certain moments. So I had a really good time with it, and I gave the finale 4 stars. If you know nothing about this series, I don't know where you have been, but it follows a woman called Emily Wilde who is a scientist who studies fairies. I also just realized I skipped over one of my audiobooks that I had finished. Again, this one was kind of left over from my Paris trip, and that was My Contrary Mary by Cynthia and Jodi, Meadows, and Brodi Ashton. This one is the first book in the Mary series by these authors. However, it also connects to the Janie's series of this authors. So you have My Lady Jane, who was the first book these 3 authors wrote together, which is kind of a alternate history of the life of whatever her name was, Lady Jane. And she was an actual person in history, so we have a little bit of a different take on her life. And then we have like different Janes that were looked at in the continuations in that series. However, with the Mary book, with this one, My Contrary Mary, we go back to the actual world of My Lady Jane. So this is kind of a sequel. We do see some of the characters of My Lady Jane again, and we also follow now main characters that were side characters in My Lady Jane. So it's a little bit confusing because the Janie series aren't actually sequels, but this one is a sequel. But whatever. I really love this world. I think the world is really fun. You have 2 kinds of people. You have Ethians and Verities. Ethians can turn into animals and Verities cannot. Verities are usually in charge, and in the first book this is very much a metaphor for Catholics and Protestants and the whole situation in England after Henry VIII. In this sequel now, I don't know how much sense this kind of like metaphor made. I'm not like very well versed with this, but we're basically following Mary Queen of Scots as she marries the French prince and what happens afterwards. And again, this is kind of like an alternate history, so even if you know what really happened, this book will maybe go into some different directions. I had a really good time with it. I really loved the humor. It's very millennial humor, so I don't know how well it would work for like actual young adults today, but I gave this one 4 stars. And with that, we come to the next audiobook I had then finished, and that was Race to Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. Again, for this one, I have a whole reading vlog where you can go and watch it and hear all of my thoughts I had during reading this book. This was one of the 5 authors I wanted to try this year. That's why you have the reading vlog. But I ended up really loving this one. This one is a fantasy book set in the desert. It's a standalone. We follow a mentor-mentee relationship for these monster races. So basically in this world, we have creatures called Keyhawks. They are very terrible people reborn. So if you murdered someone or did someone like equally terrible, you will be reborn as a Keyhawk, and the only way out of that, of like becoming something else again, is if the Keyhawk wins this particular race. And we have human riders, so basically the mentee is supposed to be the rider for one of those Keyhawks, and the mentor person is a former winner of these races. There is so much more to this story. There's a lot of like political stuff going on as well. Definitely go and read it. I really loved it. Sarah Beth Durst has become like very much more popular with her new books, but I think this one, even though it has been published a couple of years ago, is still very, very great, especially if you love desert fantasy. So please go and check it out. I gave this one 4 stars, but it's like almost 4.5. So after all of these classic books, the wheel had a little bit more kindness with its choices. And next up, it gave me Murder on the Prowl, I think the English title is, by Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown. This is the 6th books in the Miss Murphy series. In this one, we have a cat who solves murders. Miss Murphy, she has 2 pet friends who usually help her, a corgi and another cat called Pewter. This one was a little bit of a disappointment in the end. For the case, we have, I think it's called obituaries. Still haven't looked that up, but basically in the newspaper there appear like obituaries for people who have not passed away. It seems to be a prank because the first person that happens to is the director of a private school, and then he actually ends up killed. And so that is what kind of gets our pet investigators involved, and they're trying to figure out what happened. I did not love the conclusion of this one, especially again with like what is going on with like the Epstein case right now. I think the whole like story of this would have or would be viewed or would be written very differently today, but this was published in the late 90s. So yeah, I didn't love the ending, unfortunately, but I do love the like setup of the series. It's like very small town, cozy mysteries. We have this like tight-knit group of people around our main character of Harry, who is the owner of the pets I mentioned. So I don't know. I gave this one 3.5 stars in the end. The wheel continued being very nice, and it gave me the shortest book on my physical TBR, which is Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. This is the sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which I had reread last year in preparation to finally read this one, and now I did. Yay for me. This has been on the TBR for so many years. Like, for such a tiny book, it's actually ridiculous how long this has been on the shelf. But this was really cute. Like, it is definitely in the vein of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This one is more chess-based, and it also involves some kittens. We do meet some of the classic characters like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and yeah, I had a good time reading this one afternoon. It was definitely a wild ride again. I gave this one 3.5 stars as well. And then the wheel finally gave me the reason to reread The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. This is one of my favorite fantasy series, and I still have not read the final book because I wanted to do a reread of the first two books before I read the third one, and that has kept me from reading it for years now. Years, I tell you. So I finally did it. I finally reread The Library of the Unwritten. It was an amazing experience. I loved every second of it. I gave this one 4.5 on reread again. If you've never heard about this series, we are following Claire, who is the head librarian in Hell. She is responsible for the wing of unwritten books, where, as you would have guessed, the books that have not been written reside. However, these books can get quite restless and sometimes escape into the real world, and at the beginning of the story, Claire and her apprentice Brevity have to catch one of those escaped books. However, things are not what they seem, and they kind of get dragged into this plot to destroy or threaten the library, and they have to find a way to fight back. I love this book. What's interesting is that a lot of what happened in this one in my head was in the second book, so now I have no idea what actually happened in the second book, which means I have to reread that one very soon as well. Then I also finished another audiobook, and that was Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. This was definitely an interesting reading experience, a little bit different from what I had expected, because in my mind this was a book about a camp, specifically about a conversion camp. However, we don't really see the time in the camp. It's more about stuff that goes on around it. Without like spoiling too much, we are following a girl. She's like 20 something, and she is now finishing school, and she has her like last summer of freedom before like she has to figure out what to do with her life. However, she starts being haunted by, on the one hand, kind of images of a beautiful girl, and on the other hand, a literal demon. So she's trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Like, why is this demon popping up? And why is she like longingly thinking about a girl that she's never met in her life? I had a good time with this book. I think the ending got very, very, very violent. Like some of those descriptions, oh my god. I think it kind of led up to that, because we do have some like very violent things happening. And if you think about like demons stalking humans, it doesn't sound like a very like lovely situation. So this is definitely horror, and it's violent horror. So keep that in mind if you want to pick the book up. I heard someone say, I think, that this read more like YA horror, and I was like, what? With this level of violence, like, no way. But yeah, I had a good time with it. I was entertained. I did love the like overall message of the book as well. So in the end, I gave this one 4 stars, and I'm very, very intrigued to read more Chuck Tingle. And then actually the last book I finished was Universality by Natasha Brown. This was one of the library books I took on my vacation. I liked the first start of the book quite a bit. Now, if you read the description of the book, it says that this is about a person who gets attacked with a gold bar. And it kind of sounds like it's a little bit of a mystery, like what was going on? Why was this person attacked? Why the gold bar? However, that's only the first third of the book, and that kind of reads like an article in a newspaper where this whole case is described, and you get like different interviews with different people who were involved in the case and all of that. And after that first third, it is about something completely different, and I must say that while I'm pretty sure that the author did something like very smart and clever and had an amazing message with this book, I'm just not smart enough to understand it. And I think one part of that is that I'm just not well versed with like British culture right now. So I think if you are British, that probably makes much more sense. It did not to me. And I'm not quite sure what the author even did here. I think she has an amazing writing style. I did really enjoy her first book, so I gave this one 3.5 stars, but this is just, it just went over my head, to be honest. I'm not smart like that when I read books, so that was a bit of an unfortunate end to my August reading. However, still, very successful reading month. I'm very happy, especially about this big stack of books that I got off the physical TBR. So yeah, August was great. Let's hope I carried that energy into September. Wish me luck. It's also the Magical Readathon now, so very happy to read for that. I hope you have a lovely time reading. Let me know what was your favorite book you've read in August. I would love to hear about that. Leave a like, that always helps me out, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!